Michigan Democratic Senator Elissa Slotkin joins me now. She's a member of the Armed Services Committee. Senator, great to have you with us. We'll get to the China part of it in a second, but I want to get your appraisal of what happened in the Strait of Hormuz today. Two vessels stopped by Iran hostilely. We don't know exactly how. If you have any more details on that, please share them. And your assessment of your conversation with the head of Central Command today about Iran's remaining military capabilities.
Yeah, well, I think actually you can answer both issues in kind of the same way. Iran maintains the ability to project military power into the Strait of Hormuz and around the region. We've diminished their capabilities. No one questions that, right? Their nuclear, their ballistic missile capabilities, but they're still able to fire on military vessels, commercial vessels, and to hit oil infrastructure around the Persian Gulf. And because of that, I mean, the Strait of Hormuz remains non-passable. It's not moving. Nothing's moving. And so I think it just highlights again and again that you don't have to have a military go toe-to-toe with the United States. Very few militaries, if any, can actually do that. They just have to be able to pop off enough to threaten our military, or particularly the price of oil, again, by going after that oil infrastructure in order to have a bit of a veto over the Persian Gulf. So that's what we're seeing right now.
And what was your takeaway from Admiral Cooper, the head of Central Command, about what the United States has accomplished, what's yet to do, and when this conflict might end?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, there's no doubt that with the amount of ordnance we've dropped in Iran, that we have diminished their capabilities, nuclear, ballistic missile, terrorism capabilities, things that they were projecting into the Middle East. But what's clear is that we haven't gotten rid of all that capability. And certainly their drones, these cheap drones, these kamikaze drones that they're using inside the Middle East are really difficult for us to counter. And so, the CENTCOM commander talked a little bit about that and sort of said, well, they've still got kind of moderate to low capabilities, but the Persian Gulf isn't open. And so until we deal with that, either militarily or diplomatically, we're just not at the end, and you can't possibly declare victory. Now, at the same time, the American public is paying for this, right? We've got $4 a gallon gas in Michigan. So people know that we haven't resolved this. They want it to be over. They want to go back to, lower gas prices. And I think the administration is sensitive to that, which is why they're not letting this fight escalate in the Persian Gulf.
It was clear, Senator, that Chinese President Xi Jinping did a diplomatic flex on Taiwan. The United States did not flex back, rhetorically or otherwise. Maybe it did privately. Your level of concern, if any, about that?
Well, I think there's a lot of people who are worried that the president, kind of in his desire to make any kind of deal, particularly on opening the Persian Gulf or other financial deals with the Chinese, that he would kind of change longstanding American positions on Taiwan, that he would basically give China what they want, which is permission to take over Taiwan, which China says is part of their country and we don't agree with. And I think the Chinese putting out a statement saying, like, this is our priority, this is our biggest issue, and don't mess with us on this issue, was certainly a shot across the bow. My hope is that the president doesn't give up on that. That would be a huge shift. And we've got another day of negotiations. But as you said, the real guts of what happens in these meetings will come out in the next days and weeks.
You have legislation with Republican Bernie Moreno, a senator colleague of yours from Ohio, about Chinese vehicles and components coming to the U.S. What's that about, and do you have any visibility on that topic through this summit?
Yeah, well, we did this bipartisan piece of legislation ahead of the summit because there were different voices coming out of the administration hinting at the fact that they might, for the first time in U.S. history, allow China to import their cars to the United States. And we have a problem with that as an economic security issue, but also as a national security issue. So we did this bipartisan piece of legislation. We negotiated it. We talked to industry. We talked to labor and put it out ahead of the summit just to make the point clear that there's really strong sentiment that we not give China what they want on this and let their vehicles come in. And so far, we haven't heard anything about that, and I'll take no news as good news.
I'm endlessly fascinated, Senator, about artificial intelligence, and there is quite evidently a race between the United States and China to maximize whatever the capabilities of artificial intelligence are. Jensen Huang of NVIDIA was a late add to this summit, attending it in China. The Chinese desperately want NVIDIA's most advanced chips. There are legitimate national security concerns about China not getting their hands on those. How do you evaluate where this is?
Yeah, I think this is the fundamental difference and sort of stress that I felt going into this summit. Is where is President Trump vis-a-vis China? What's his approach? Is he hawkish the way he kind of was in his first term, where he understood the national security threats? Or is he completely changing his tune and if we can get a good deal and it makes financial sense for him and his administration, then he will do whatever and not care much about national security? Letting those chips, those super-powered AI, most sophisticated chips we've ever invented, letting them be sold to China was a confusing and I think a bad decision. Having NVIDIA's leader on that, in these conversations on Air Force One or going in part of the delegation, just reinforced my concern that we're giving away the farm when it comes to these sensitive chips. Why would we give an advantage to China when we know there's quite literally an arms race going on in the classified world on artificial intelligence? So I've got real concerns about what we're giving up. And I know that the president feels strongly about making a deal. I just don't want him to give away our national security in his desperation on a deal.
Eric Trump is on this trip. I don't need to tell you, Senator, that back when President Biden was in office, Republicans made a great deal of hay about members of the Biden family being close to the president and close to potential business deals. Eric Trump has quite a few business deals pending and developing and is on this trip along with the president. Evaluate.
I mean, look, I think we are just at the tip of the iceberg in understanding the level of corruption, of double dealing, of using insider information to enrich the president's family and the president's closest confidants in the cabinet. I think it's just the beginning of the story. And whatever policy disagreements I may have with the president, it's something completely different than just straight up using your opportunities and influence to enrich yourself. And particularly when you're right, this administration had criticized Joe Biden to no end. And what they're doing is so fundamentally different. I mean, the cryptocurrency that the Trump sons have started, we think that they've made over $1 billion in that cryptocurrency. You can imagine how that feels to the average person who's spending more on gas every single day. It just feels like the American people are losing while people around the president are enriching themselves. And it leaves a bad taste in every American's mouth.
Before I let you go, it has been reported that you are leaving the door open to potentially running for the presidency in 2028. Is that true?
Look, this is like the favorite parlor game of Washington.
I know.
There's
and I'm not going to fence with you about it. I just want to give you a chance to respond.
Look, I am talking to everyone who says they're running. It's like a huge spreadsheet of people. It does not have to be me. I want to be a part on the Democratic side of the next generation of leaders who just change the party and make us stronger. And I think that's going to take a new generation. I want to be a part of that one way or another.
Michigan Democratic Senator Elissa Slotkin, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
You bet. Thanks.
Lanhee Chen joins me now. He's a fellow at the Hoover Institution. Known him for quite a while. Lanhee, it's good to see you. Great to have you on the program. Give me your readout.
Good to be with you, Major. Thank you.
From a distance. I know it's from a distance, but you're well-versed and you're well-sourced on what's going on in China, publicly and maybe privately.
Well, privately is really the thing we ought to all be paying attention to, because there are the conversations that really matter, whether it's with respect to some kind of economic arrangement that China may be agreeing to, the discussion over the future of AI technology and how much of that technology will be transferred from the United States to China. And then more broadly, of course, these geostrategic questions, which China has put front and center in their readout, whether it's Taiwan, which is sort of the sine qua non of issues for the Chinese Communist Party, or issues around what's happening in Xinjiang, human rights, the Strait of Hormuz. These are all the trickier issues. So I imagine that many of these issues are being discussed in private, but publicly at least, the posture that the U.S. is taking is that this is an economic discussion. The posture that China is taking is that this is a geopolitical discussion. And so that is going to be very difficult to square in private. And so I am very curious, to the point that Senator Slotkin made, what we find out over the next couple of weeks and months have come out of these conversations between President Xi and Trump.
How do you diagram the Jensen Huang, NVIDIA, AI part of this summit and conversations, either cooperatively, maybe, or far more likely in a hostile context with China and the future of artificial intelligence?
Well, there's just no question that a lot of the innovation in this area is still happening right here in America. And for China to do what it needs to do, I mean, they talk a lot about the native technology available there, and there's no question that they have managed to grow that sector tremendously. But the reality is that for China to get to where it wants to go, it still needs access to American technology. It needs access to the kinds of things that NVIDIA and other American companies are producing. So this is actually quite an existential issue, I think, for the Chinese. The big question on our part is how much of that infrastructure is going to be built on the backbone of American innovation and American technology versus technology from somewhere else. So I think that there are mutual benefits to be had. The reality, though, is that right now we are in a strategic competition with China. We are in a posture that makes it very difficult for us to simply say, hey, we'd love to share our gains and our benefits with China and, frankly, with countries that are aligned with China. So that's where the conflict comes in. There's an economic interest for the U.S., obviously, for U.S. companies like NVIDIA, others that are in this space. But fundamentally, in the long run, the question becomes, how much are you willing to gain economically in the short run for potential strategic downside in the long run? And I think that's got to be the issue at the center of these conversations in Beijing now.
Lanhee, something strikes me about this trip, and I wonder if it strikes you. And it's okay if it doesn't, but I'm just curious if it does. When I've been on these trips, U.S.-China summits, typically before or immediately after, the American president will go to Japan, South Korea, to reassure our allies in the region. President Trump's not doing that.
This is a very carefully scripted trip, and the president has benefited from the pomp and circumstance of being greeted in Beijing, having the private tour of these different facilities throughout Beijing, being able to really immerse himself in all of the pageantry that comes with a state visit. And you're right in the sense that the focus of this trip is not about the geopolitical stability of the region. It's not about reassuring allies and friends. That may happen at a later date. That may happen down the road. But this trip is really about the U.S.-China relationship and President Trump's belief that he is single-handedly able to do and negotiate with President Xi in a way that no other American leader can. That's what he's trying to project. That's what this trip is all about. So fundamentally, it doesn't surprise me that we're not seeing, for example, a side trip to Japan or Korea, maybe even to Singapore to reassure some of our Southeast Asian allies about the U.S. posture in the region. So I think that while it is different from what history would suggest we would see, it's not entirely surprising given how the president sees this relationship and sees his role in it.
But I'm going to guess, Lanhee, that heads of state, foreign ministers, finance ministers from all those name-checked countries, they're going to be burning up the line in the next couple of days to find out what went down. Lanhee Chen, Hoover Institution, I appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks so much.
Thank you.